Darwin, thank you so much for joining us. Darwin Friend, Head of Research at the Taxpayers Alliance. Darwin, do you think we get value for money with our council tax when it comes to refuse collection?
Well, based on what we're hearing today, I don't think we do. I mean, the government promised fortnightly collections, and as you've said, it looks like it could be going potentially up to monthly for some councils. And I think residents are frankly fed up and feel taxed enough already. And personally, I don't think that they should be forced to pay even more in council tax, which they're expected to next year, up again another £110, for what are basic core services that they expected to be delivered.
Yeah, that's in England and Wales, isn't it? £110, that expected right.
Yes, it is. And I think that builds upon the current level of average Band D council tax in England, which this year alone is £2,171. And I don't think taxpayers, given that we're already set to be facing a record tax burden, can afford to pay even more, as I say, for this basic core service that they need and expect to be delivered. I mean, in some houses, they simply don't have the space to collect more refuse if it goes up to a monthly collection. If you live in a flat, for example, you might not have, for example, wheelie bins to put that rubbish into. You might have to use bin sacks. Now they need to be put out and then collected by rubbish collectors. And so councils need to make sure that they're delivering that service and not just pushing it out even longer for local residents.
Darwin, how do you get on with your bins, right? What's your relationship with the collection times and the collection period you have to deal with?
Well, mine are frankly picked up every week. And so that works for me. I mean, I do live in a flat. And so actually having that weekly service means that my bins aren't overflowing. But if it goes out to fortnightly or even monthly, frankly, I think me and people such as myself won't be able to cope in that scenario. And they frankly do need to be picked up every week or fortnightly at the very latest.
So, Darwin, at local council level, and how is this worked out financially? You know, how often and how regularly is it discussed, and how often is that put into play?
So it's regularly discussed. Frankly, it's normally a yearly discussion that they have. And what they talk about is the number of bin collections that they need to have, the frequency in which they're collected, and also any revenue that they can make, for example, by selling on the waste that they collect. And what we've seen recently in a report that we released was that some councils are forcing local residents to organise their waste into up to 10 different receptacles. I believe the highest was in Blanel Gwent, where it was 10. And I think alongside the fact that bin collections are potentially going to be protracted as well, the complex nature of some of these councils which are enforcing it upon their local residents is frankly getting too much for their local residents, which alongside prolonged bin collections and the size of council tax, I think is just becoming overbearing for local residents.
Darwin, that's the question again, isn't it? Every penny is a prisoner for local authorities at the moment, but you know, the money's being stretched in every direction. But do you feel like it could be more efficient from what you're hearing?
Yeah, especially in this area as well, I do. And I think the government actually recognises that as well. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we did a big report earlier this year which looked at the number of bins that people are forced to organise their rubbish to in each local authority in the country. And it ranged from as little as 2 or 3 for some up to 10 for others. And what the government actually, I believe, announced recently was that they were going to mandate local authorities to get rubbish collected and organised into 4 receptacles. And I think what that's going to do is actually simplify the process and ultimately save costs for councils, because rather than organising collections for up to 10 different receptacles and then having to figure out whether residents have organised it correctly into each one, if they can organise it into 4 and those collections of those bins are frequent, then people have the incentives, as Penny was talking about earlier, to actually do the right thing and make sure that they're organising their waste appropriately.
Right, here's a question for you. Waste management is a national issue and shouldn't be left to local authorities. Would you agree with that, Darwin?
Well, I certainly think when there are such disparities in how things are done in terms of local authorities, as I mentioned, between 2 and 10 bins, I think then there does need to be some role for the national government in that. But ultimately, as we all understand and respect, it's up to local authorities to organise these bin collections and make sure they're actually being carried out. But I certainly think the government needs to play a role if it's going to become en masse local authorities prolonging bin collections out to a month or even longer than that potentially we could see in future as well. Then I do think the government needs to impose some level of standards upon local authorities so that then residents are getting the service that they're ultimately paying for.